Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that's going to have you coming back for more. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back. And I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So before we get into the main event, if you're on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes. If you're listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you subscribe there as well. And then for those who want to donate to our platform to help us grow it even bigger, make sure you go to the following platforms. You can go to Cash App using our handle $IDTALK4ED, Venmo using our handle @Kwame SM, PayPal using the URL paypal.me/Kwame SM. And then if you're on Patreon and you want to be part of the community, become a patron today so you can get behind the scenes footage of the podcast as well as some perks as a token of appreciation for all the support you've given us over the years. And of course, if you want to catch future and past episodes of the podcast, you can go to our main website at identitytalk4educators.com. And for our avid readers, if you're looking for a book to add to your library, I'm going to recommend my own book, Learn to Relearn, Supporting Identity and Culture Affirming Classroom. It's been out for a few months and the reception has been nothing short of amazing. Thank you for everybody who's been supporting the book, spreading the word to a family friend or a colleague or a loved one, anybody who's left reviews of the book or has given any public testimonies about it. I appreciate all the support. All of it matters. Believe me, I don't take any of it for granted. And if you're someone that maybe doesn't know about the book, you want to learn more about it, you can always go to the main website, which is learntorelearn.com, to learn more. And thank you for those who are supporting. All right, people. So we got another action-packed episode, and I am excited to bring on today's guest. We're going to be talking about radical dreaming. We're going to be talking about liberation. These are two things that I totally am passionate about, and I believe we all should be engaged in. So she is someone that not only talks it, but she models it in every facet of her life. So without further ado, I just want to bring on Dr. Jamila Dugan to the podcast to talk with us about her life, her journey in education, and all the amazing things she is doing right now. So let's bring Dr. Dugan on. Hello.
Hey!
Love it. How are we?
Oh, I'm so good. It's sunny outside today. Weather is warm. I'm talking to you. Been looking forward to it. So I'm feeling good.
Yes, likewise. It is nighttime here in Lusaka, but the energy is up
Yeah.
because you're here. So I appreciate you. And you're still in the Sunshine State, I'm assuming.
I am here in the Sunshine State, Tampa, Florida.
Tampa. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out Tampa.
Temporary home, though. Temporary home. I'm from Oakland, California. Got to keep that straight.
Okay, the town.
Yeah.
Coming from the town. All right. Yeah. Well, you know what? We're gonna start there. Cause are you a Warriors fan by any chance? You follow basketball?
You're starting with complicated questions here. Now, when they were in Oakland, 100%, but they done made some changes that I don't know if I agree with. So I'm with Curry.
Bay Area, you know.
I'm still, kind of, but when they was in Oakland, it was a little bit different.
Nah, I agree. I miss it when they were in Oakland.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I miss it. But I'm watching the playoffs though.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm looking forward to them closing out the series.
Yesterday was bad.
Game 6. But I saw that coming. When you beat a team down like that on their home court, they're gonna come back with a vengeance. And as expected, that's what they did. So no surprises there. But we'll table that for another conversation. But let's talk about the main thing. Let's start from the beginning. So you just mentioned you're from the town,
Yep.
Oakland, California, home of the Black Panthers. So much history there. Talk to me about your early upbringing and what inspired you to even want to do this work that we call education. Let's start there.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you again for having me here. I've been talking about Oakland a lot in my upbringing because Ryan Coogler right now with Sinners. And we've been
I
talking
just
a
watched
lot.
it too.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot
Amazing.
about the swag that just comes from Oakland. It feels really special. So to see him has been really cool lately. But you know what's so funny? I had no intentions of becoming an educator. Totally random.
Stop.
Totally random. Not didn't even cross my mind. I went from wanting to be an ice skater to an architect to a model to a psychologist, all over the place. But when I was in college, I walked past a poster that said, do you care about contributing to your community? And I was like, well, yes, I do. And it was a fellowship program to become a teacher. And I was like, I'm going to apply to that tonight when I get home. And I had no idea what the program was, but it turned out being Teach for America, which, there's a lot of controversy, but I had no idea what it was. And that's how I ended up becoming a teacher. And I will say to you this in terms of where it started. I didn't intend to be an educator, but the educator I am, I can tell how I was shaped by educators all throughout my childhood up to now that allows me to be the educator I am. So it was random, to be honest with you. It was random.
Yeah, random, huh? So as I was just learning about your early life, I was surprised to see that someone as accomplished and distinguished as you are right now, you had your struggles, growing up. I know high school was a challenge, but one thing that I was able to come across in my research is that you did go to a school that was focused around Pan-Africanism. And as somebody who taught in a similar school that was African-centered, I know how beneficial that is in terms of people knowing their self-worth and understanding that knowledge of self. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about that experience, but also what were some of the specific struggles that you had going through that K-12 schooling?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. You can see all these degrees behind me, but
Yeah.
next to it, let's see if I can kind of turn it. Next to it, you see the gold thing there?
Nice.
Next to it is my letter of failure out of high school that my father.
You got that framed.
Oh yeah, I got it framed. Yes,
Awesome.
yes. Where I, was being kicked out because of my, I don't know if it says, I think it's 72 absences in 1 year. And my I think it was a 1.8 GPA, maybe. Yeah, it's 1.8 GPA in high school. So I have that framed up there. I sure do. Yeah, it's up there. I keep it. Yeah, I keep it next to me just to remember what the journey was and how I got to where I am. But you asked me about some of my struggles. So when I was a kid, let's just think about elementary school. I did just fine. I had really great teachers. I have really fond memories around learning how to write and things of that sort. I also had teachers who kept it really real in my elementary experiences, all coming from all kinds of backgrounds. But what was happening as I got to fifth grade, really sixth, seventh grade, there was a lot of turmoil in my household. One day I had a mom that I saw, and the next day I did not have her anymore. And, for a young girl growing up, it's probably not the best time to lose one of your parents or not have one of your parents anymore at that pivotal time. And so schools, I believe, were and are still designed to meet the needs of students who come and are just focused on being compliant in class for the most part, most schools.
Right.
And my schools were like that too. And so all of a sudden I wasn't that student and no one really paid attention. So in ninth grade, I did pretty well, but then 10th grade, all of a sudden I'm failing and no one seemed to ask like, hey, what's different about that? And so in my high school, when I was put into, before you get to AP, it's HP, honors placement. No one asked why I went into HP, but then all of a sudden dropped out. Well, if they would have asked me, I left those classes because I went in and it was all white kids. And my friends were all in the general ed classes and they were mostly Black kids. So that's why I left, but no one asked me that. No one had any conversation with me about it. I started cutting class all of the time. My self-esteem was really low, but at the same time, I was highly affirmed. When I was kicking it like on the block with my friends, to be honest. I wasn't going anywhere special. I was kicking it in the neighborhood with my friends. North Oakland specifically. I'm from East Oakland, but I would go to North Oakland to kick it with my friends. And no one was asking me why I was cutting, why I was leaving. Instead, the conversation was really about why you aren't doing what you need to be doing in class. And for many kids, and like me, I really didn't care about that conversation about why I wasn't doing what I needed to be doing. And so long story short, through that high school experience going downward in terms of the schooling, I failed out and my dad told me that I'm about to put you in a different school and I cursed him out. I love you, Dad. My dad knows I love him so much. It was a different time and place. I told him he wasn't going to be doing that. And he said, you were going to be doing it. And so that's when I was introduced to African Children Advanced Learning Center in West Oakland, California. And that school was all centered in affirming your identity as an African person, as an African American person, as a Black person overall, having pride in that, really exploring the principles of Mayat and really being invested in academic rigor and really self-reliance. So we're really a lot of the principles that are aligned to Kwanzaa. And so that is where I went and I transformed very, very quickly. And some of that was because, let me tell you something, Kwame, you were a math teacher, right? Okay, when I was in my first high school, I figured out all the tricks not to do the math work because I was scared of the math work. But when I got to ACAL, I told Babu Ustadi, shout out to Babu Ustadi, I was like, we were about to do pre-algebra and he was like, you're getting ready to do this math. And I was like, well, I don't know how to do math. And he was like, well, you're going to. And I was like, well, I don't really. He was like, get this book and come sit down and do this math. And the high expectations, like there was no option for me not to do what was asked of me, I think was super, super, super important. And I'll share more things about what that experience was like. But let's just say that getting there and them being firm about their vision, values, and what they expected of us as children based on who we are, changed my life. And those issues and challenges that I experienced, something that I had to work through for a good while. But in terms of my academic identity and who I was as a young person, really changed as a result of being in that space. And it was pretty cool because it was aligned to my upbringing. Really, my whole family is super Pan-African. So it was a really nice match to that as well.
And you mentioned Ma'at. So when I think about Ma'at, automatically I think about balance. So you come into a situation where you're coming in imbalance in your life.
Yeah.
Having your mom being absent, going through your struggles in your previous high school. Now you come into a space where it represents stability. So I'd love for you to tell me, how did that experience in the Pan-African school allow you to have the balance that you needed in order to excel?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I'm very cognizant that not everybody can go to a Pan-African school. So I want to give some really like basic things that apply to everywhere and then some, really unique features there.
Right.
So the first thing is like we put kids in two spaces with too many people, just way too many people and not enough support, right? And so when I got to that school, there's so much research about making class sizes smaller. And just being in a space where I had a focused teacher with a smaller amount of students who were And the teacher was really, they weren't called teachers, they're babas. But our babas were really focused on what we needed in an Oakland context as Black people at that time. I think just creates a certain container that allows for stability because you're being held in a certain way. You're not coming in there as an object that needs to learn a set of standards. You're coming in there as at a developing young person who we need to cultivate to have self-worth, self-identity, and see themselves as important and equipped in this world, right? It's just a different stance. And I think any building or any school could do that. But when I think about stability there, let me just say what my coursework was. So yes, we had science. Yes, we had math. But the most important thing, I think, in terms of creating stability was our class called Our Story. It was not called history class. And I looked forward to our story every single day because it was exactly that. History through the lens of our story. And when any student, at least in my opinion, and what I observed, when any student gets to have their history grounded in the roots of their own people first, right? Because you want to learn about the entire world. When you start there, you become hungry to know more about where your people are coming from and how you contributed and the things that also made it hard for your people as well. That starts to build the foundation of some level of self-worth and affirmation, which allows you to be more stable. So Our Story, I think, was just such an important class around that. And then I think there's a real misunderstanding around a desire for students to be, for children to be held accountable. I know as people talk about things like restorative practice, there's a real misunderstanding that it means moving away from accountability. And for us, accountability was huge, which I do think contributed to stability. So if you thought that you were going to tell a lie, or if you thought you was going to do someone wrong, you could believe you was going to be writing at least 5 pages on one of the principles of my act. You can believe that you were going to have a detailed conversation with probably Baba Woods about the choice you decided to make. And you were not leaving that conversation until it was full, like a full, well-rounded conversation. And I think when you understand that you're not just going to be sent home or whatever, and you're going to be held to talk specifically about something that you might have a challenge with, it creates this kind of cocoon of being seen, but also being held accountable, which helps you when you start to make mistakes, because that's what all kids do. You kind of know that there's a space where you're going to fall onto that's either going to encourage you or reinforce a different set of behavior based on your value, not your deficit. So those are some of the things that come to my mind. Our Story was, everybody should have an Our Story class for real. Yeah.
I'm telling you. So when I was working as a teacher at one of the freedom schools in Philadelphia, like I felt that energy. And the kids, they came with that energy. I can remember them coming in with the kente ties and they got the suits on and everything. And it was just refreshing to see every single day. So when you describe that experience, it resonates with me so much because it just takes me back to that time. And I can see how it benefited so many of my students who are now grown and they live in their own lives. But I want to go ahead and move forward. So it sounds like being in that space, that Pan-African space, really served as the harbinger for what it meant to be liberated, right? Because you talk so much about liberatory education and how that's important for all of us to experience. So I'd love for you to just elaborate more about how that evolve for you from that experience and then going into college?
Yeah. So what's coming to me right now is just a very simple question. What is the reason we're going to school? What are we going to school for?
Talk about it.
What are we? Why are we there? And when I look back on my high school, which was not like I had a pretty decent experience aside from not doing any of my work in my original high school. But when I think about what the purpose of going to that school was, it was so that I could get the right grades, so I could pass the right tests, so I could get into college, presumably, right?
Okay.
That's what I'm gonna assume. But when I went to ACAL, that did not seem to be the purpose. It seemed to be that I would come out of that space proud of who I am, proud of my people, academically prepared and clear on my values, so that I could contribute to the world, but certainly contribute to the elevation of my people and the elevation of Oakland, and then the elevation of all of us. And that to me is what liberatory education is supposed to be about. When I think about what we're going to school for and why we were going to school, is so that we could be free. And that's a very different thing than so that we could do a test that's going to get me the job, that's going to get me the thing. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't go get whatever the job is, but it is a completely different lens. And I can very much remember, like, there's a part of me that sees liberatory education related to understanding, affirming your roots, your history, your context, a lot of identity affirmation and development. There's also a part of liberatory education that is related to economics, that is related to being able to navigate the world as it is, to bend it to what you want it to be. And I very much remember Baba Tabiti coming in and him teaching us how to create a small business, which for us was a school store that sold a lot of hot Cheetos. Now, probably they didn't want us to be doing that, but he taught us how to start a small business, how to price our items, how to, he took us to the store to create our inventory, all these different things. And through that, he was also teaching us about crystals and things of that sort. But through that, he was teaching us about how economic freedom would allow us to pursue liberation as well. And so I think through those experiences of having a lot of focus on our identity, as you talk about so much, but having that focus on identity and where you're trying to go as a people and person, how you think about what you're going to do to contribute, whether that's financially or in other tangible ways to this world, that started to shape a picture for me of liberatory education that really comes down to what is the purpose of school, or whatever the thing is. Like, what's the purpose of your business? What's the purpose of your podcast? What's the purpose? What is the purpose? And ultimately, if you're liberatory minded, it has something to do with getting free, coming together and being free, experiencing freedom. It all relates to that. And so I think for me, I think just those experiences kind of shaped me to think in that way. And then this is something that I've been trying to talk more related to liberation, and I haven't found the right words to. But when I was out and I was cutting, and this is like being a little personal now, I had a boyfriend who was a hustler, okay? And he made a lot of money doing what he was doing. Let's just say he made a lot of money doing. But what I learned, what I learned from him was how hustle can allow you to think creatively about how you're going to get free. And I have taken that spirit of hustle, not being a hustler, like, trying to swindle. That's not what I'm talking about. Someone who knows how to take what they got and figure out how to make it something else. I took that, left ACAL in my senior year, graduated quickly, did independent study, finished. I did a year and a half of college in the first year at junior college, saved my money so I could figure out how to go to the 4-year college after that. And all of that to me still, as I'm pursuing liberation for myself, my family, my kids, and people overall now, that is deeply connected to it, because we're living in a world where the pathway to freedom is not always nice and clear. It requires a little bit of hustle, and that needs to be a part of people's conception of liberatory education, I think, as well.
Hi friends, it's me, Thaddeus from Thaddeus Nature Notebook. Are you loving our journey into the wild and learning all about awesome animals? Then don't forget to subscribe. You can find Thaddeus Nature Notebook on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Just hit that subscribe button and never miss a new episode. And if you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment about your favorite animal. Thanks for listening and exploring nature with me. Let's keep discovering together. Now back to my daddy's self.
Yes. And as we're talking about liberatory education, I think it's a perfect segue to talk about radical dreaming, which you talk about ad nauseum.
Yes.
And it's necessary for us to talk about ad nauseum. So for our listeners and viewers who may not be familiar with the concept of radical dreaming, I mean, I certainly am, but some of us may not be familiar. I'd love for you to just share how you define this concept and why you believe it's necessary given the times that we're in.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. I talk about it ad nauseum because I do. And I am that bought in, and I want everybody else to be bought into the idea, because the pathway to liberation in my mind begins with radical dreaming. Yes. So let me start with the real basic definition that I have come to understand. And that definition is shaped by Robin D.G. Kelley. It's also shaped by Studio B in Louisiana. Those are the two places I would say my understanding comes from. Number one, radical dreaming is to look at the reality of injustice or inequity as it exists. Don't run from it. Look at it and then say, with this reality as it exists, this uncomfortable truth, what is justice going to look like? What is it going to look like when it's eradicated? What is it going to look like when it's not present? And to really put your focus, your creative juices, your innovation juices, and really try to envision what could be possible instead of what you're experiencing now. And when I think about why this is so important, it really is the journey for how I got to the idea in the first place. COVID was a very difficult time for me, very difficult time. I was watching my son specifically go through some really challenging things that it was very different. And I was really thinking then, he's having a real difficulty in school, but I feel like I'm seeing him also have this blossoming idea about having a yacht business, funny enough. And it's feeling like he's wanting something that's a little bit bigger. And I was also noticing that people were talking so much about how much learning loss there was going to be and all that. And I was feeling like this is not hitting the spirit that I told you about from ACAL, right? Affirmation, knowing that there's a lot of value there. I was like, oh, what is it? And my wonderful friend named Rachel Reinhardt, I love you, Rachel. She said, have you read the book about the Black Radical Imagination, Freedom Dreams by Robin D.G. Kelley? Everyone should have this text. And I said, no, Rachel, I have not. And so I read it. And when I read that book, I found that he did the study that almost every liberation movement started with freedom dreaming. So when you ask me why this is so important right now, the movements that he was talking about, he spends a lot of time exploring the world for Black folks. Can you imagine what it was like to be in bondage and not being able to have the agency to move your body when you wanted to move your body? And somehow these individuals were able to dream up being free, and then from the dream plan and make it happen. I mean, if you want to think about a challenging time to be in, and he goes all across the world in many different movements, there is nothing to do in my mind right now. And let me not say nothing, that's hyperbolic. It is incredibly important right now as we experience so much political upheaval. The things that are happening in the world, wars, just the amount of things that are happening, for me to get grounded and stable, as you talked about earlier. I better look at this for what it is, acknowledge that my ancestors acknowledged some other things and looked at some other things in the face many times. And I better sit myself still, and I better put my energy on what can be possible and create a cocoon and a container for myself and others to navigate in that space, so that when we are in the broader world, we are driven by a passion, a vision of what is possible, navigating the difficulty, and that will allow us to keep our eyes on the prize of liberation. And so I am very invested in this idea, and I just have to say, not as a fluffy notion, Kwame, at all. Something that is pedagogical, something that is extremely rigorous, and something that children kind of know how to already do better.
And that's a very ambitious endeavor. People need to understand that when we're talking about this idea of radical dreaming and this pursuit for liberation, racial battle fatigue is inevitable.
Yep.
If you don't believe me, just go back to the history books, look at the ancestors who fought for civil rights, who fought for human rights and everything else. I mean, Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
You sure
If
did.
that's not an indication of racial battle fatigue, I don't know what is, right?
Yep.
So when you think about the history of the work and even what you're doing or trying to do right now, like it requires a lot of you.
Yeah.
A lot of your energy and time and investment to do this. So I want to know, as someone who engages with the work, how do you rest? When did you even recognize how valuable rest is? Because I think sometimes we just be on the grind that we just forget to sit still.
Yeah. 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 So I want to answer that question. I want to just go a little bit backwards to just illustrate a little bit around what radical dreaming actually looks like, because I know I said the idea, but then some people might be like, that sounds really great.
Yeah,
What
please.
what are you actually talking about?
Yeah, please.
And so, one of the, I kind of shared where the idea came from. But as I kind of got into it, I said, well, I probably should start radically dreaming myself. And so I decided to really put my mind on what would the work that I'm doing look like if I was doing it at the best level, at the most wholesome level. And I started to dream about the people I would work with. What would I do and who would I work with? And it started to come to me that I wanted to work with those who are the liberators, those who are the pedagogical geniuses, those who manifest what we're saying matters to us in their real life day to day. So I randomly reached out to people who inspired me on Twitter, like strangers, and to my sisters in education circle that Dr. Acosta Lassane created. And I just said, hey, I've been thinking about this idea of radical dreaming. Do you want to get with me on this? And they said, yeah, that sounds really, really great. Let's start thinking about how we create learning experiences, because I do professional development for people that are rooted in radical dreaming and then the pedagogy that goes with it. And we designed our first learning experience rooted in radical dreaming. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback on workshops, but it was an embodied, spiritual, full experience that people talked about them having that made me say, when I do pedagogical professional learning experiences, this is what I have to be rooted in. And so now, like, there's lots of communities and practices and workshops and all this kind of stuff that were related to it. So it ends up being tangibly applied to the way that you can develop learning experiences. In all of that, to your question, you're doing a lot of work. It's a lot of energy to be dreaming, to be putting the actual things together to make it happen. And I have to say to you all, some of that came from COVID as well. I could not go at the pace that I was going in my work and tend to my son and my daughter in the way that I needed to. It was too much. And at that time, I couldn't really figure out how to shift. But because it was so difficult, I had to just pause everything for a moment and kind of regroup. And that pausing kind of said, Jamila, you're going to have to really think differently about how you schedule your time, how you provide your energy. And that was the beginning. But Trisha brought it home. When I was introduced to the notion of rest as resistant, it became very clear to me that all this liberatory talking and all that was going to be for naught if I did not learn from history and our ancestors and elders and know that that's the next iteration, is that we can do this work and be whole and put together. And so that started my pursuit of really thinking about rest. And as you know, there's ways that I'm trying to bring rest to others as a result of my exploration. So the way that I think about my time, my energy, the way that I think about holding space for me to eat lunch is completely different as kind of a result of starting with the radical dreaming, but then realizing that the energy and the ebbs and flows were going to require me to operate as a completely different person. And I think that's really hard for us to get behind, but I just do not see how we're going to do it without that. And I don't think it means, I really like that Trisha talks about both really large scale things that you can do for rest, but then also just those moments that you take time. She talks about her grandmother who would just sit for 20 minutes and close her eyes for herself. I think about the time that you take to eat food for your body. These types of really small, tangible things have really helped me see that rest can be something that we that we define for ourselves and is a little bit more possible. So it really has been an evolution, because I used to grind, Kwame, like real hard. And I still do grind, I do, but in a very different way that allows for not just hustle, but flow. I'm all about flow now. Can I get into a flow? And if I can get into a flow, we'll be all right. But if I'm in that other place, then I'm unstable and then it don't work.
Yeah. I find it amazing how we recognize the value of rest when we remove ourselves from the classroom space. So I have not been in a K-12 classroom since 2019.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I was a middle school math teacher for a decade. Loved it, but it took a physical and emotional toll on me.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I removed myself from that space that I realized, okay, there's more to life than this. There's other ways that I can fill my cup and still do the work that I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, yeah. I love when you say that because I think it's an important thing for us to acknowledge that we're navigating in a space that's outside the classroom, right?
Yes.
One of the things that I didn't realize I had this privilege before, but I have had the privilege of working under really excellent people. Like I think pretty much my whole career one of the things I sometimes struggle with when people talk about what is not possible in terms of making the classroom space one where people can stay is that when I was a teacher, I had a lot of space. That's like not present anymore. My administrator, Aname, at that time, and Danielle Neves, they made sure that I had planning time every day. I did not do lunch duty, ever. That was not something that teachers were asked to do. It was really important that if you were going to have the academic excellence that they were looking for in your planning, that you were going to have time to do it. And so, some people might not like it, but I had to be there 30 minutes before work started and an hour after to be able to take time to do my planning. I had planning time every day, and that allowed me to rest. During my lunchtime, I would take 15 minutes to just close my eyes because it was actually my lunchtime. And so when I talk to you about radically dreaming myself about those who are the liberators that actually do the work, those are the people I'm trying to help us learn from, because I really want us to move to a place where we see more possibility, both in the classroom space and out of the classroom space. And I feel really blessed to have experienced a little bit of both of those spaces.
The Identity Talk for Educators Live podcast is just one piece of the work that we do under Identity Talk Consulting, which we've had since 2019. And since then, we've had the privilege of working with 40 different schools, districts, and organizations across the globe. And we want to continue to add to that number in this new year. So if you are a school, if you're an educator or an organization that's looking to receive professional development and consulting services within any of our pillars, whether it's anti-bias, anti-racist practices, culturally responsive teaching, or identity affirming education, we are the firm for you, and we love to learn more about your needs. When you have a chance, make sure you go to our website at identitytalk4educators.com to learn more about our services and to schedule a discovery call today. We love to hear from you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that we have to look at even deeper. I'm just thinking about the life of a teacher.
Yeah.
Why we even do the work. I mean, at first, it's something that's inherent. It's something that's intrinsic. We do it because we genuinely love it. Most of us do. But we also know that we're not getting paid a whole lot to do this work. Many of us know that going into it.
Yeah.
But then over time, we realize, I need a little bit more bread. Like this ain't cutting it. And then we start to take on all these other responsibilities and all these other side hustles. We trying to get our 5 years so that we can get these loans forgiven. And I got a whole story about that, but I'm not even gonna, delve into it, be as technicality that calls me to, pay 4 more years of loans. But,
Yeah.
that's the government for you. It's amazing how the most important profession in the world gets the least amount of respect.
Yep.
Like the fact that we educate the most important people on our globe, but we get the least amount of support. And you have to work extra hard just to advance yourself professionally, which requires you going further and further into debt.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about radical dreaming, one radical dream that I have.
All right, let me hear it.
Oh, and that's something that I've mentioned this before, but my radical dream, one of them is that if you are an educator that is coming out of a teacher prep program or just a university, if we're talking about retention, particularly for Black and brown teachers, because we still talk about it even today.
Yeah.
We still have an issue with retention.
Yeah.
We should pay off the first 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? First 5 years of loans.
Yep.
We got you covered.
Yep.
All you gotta do is show up.
Yep.
And after the 5 years, if you want to continue and do this work, that'll be awesome. If not, we appreciate you.
Yeah.
But at least we get 5 years of you. So kind of similar to the TFA model.
Yeah.
There's some similarities there, but it's like, no, like let's stretch it.
Yeah.
So we have some more continuity.
Yeah, I love when you say that because one of the things that's interesting, my husband is in the Coast Guard, and he is in charge of saving people's lives. It's incredible to see the work that he does, but that's what they do in the Coast Guard. Why can't we? I just don't understand why we can't do that. They pay for your college for you to go. And then they, as long as you do I think it's 3 years, not 5, then you're good to go. And if you keep going, then we'll pay for more school for you to go. And I really struggle with why we don't think that these things are possible. But I think that's why radical dreaming is so important, because I think sadly, sometimes we're even just scared to make that an idea. Can you imagine, Kwame, just imagine for a second, you saying that right there. Yep. And then people saying, you being in a school setting and saying that, and people getting on board with that. And then you get into a district setting in that same school, and then they get on board with that. Can you imagine if every one of those people just kept saying that over and over? What would happen? It's just like we see with these people coming to the school board meetings and, making other things happen, like books disappearing. If enough people got onto that radical dream like that, it would be such an immovable force that then people's conception about what's possible would begin to grow, because it's just how energy works. You know what I mean? So I just even love you putting it out there, because then it reminds me of examples of how it's possible. And then it just has the potential to allow people to get behind it and then make it a reality. It can be a reality, It
can be, and it should be. It should be. So as we're staying on this concept of radical dreaming, you did mention briefly about finding spaces of rest for teachers. That's something that you brought up. I'm wondering if there's some other radical dreams that you have for 2025 and beyond.
Yes, there are some radical dreams that I have, because you can't talk about radical dreaming without dreaming.
Of course.
And so there are. So let me just try to say the 4 main ones that are on my mind right now. I have a dream that I will be able to, through collaborating, leaning on each other, holding space for each other, I will be able to increase compensation for teachers of color that I work with, period. That if they work, that the teachers that are in the space right now doing the thing that we say that we want to be happening, that if I can create space for us to collaborate, that their compensation will increase. And so great that one of them I've been working with has already been able to pay off her loans just through that dream and us coming together. Like, actually, truly, that is, if I can grow the practice of, instead of hiring me as the outside consultant only. I do fantastic work. But when we think about pedagogy in the classroom, I'm going to collaborate with the teacher, but we're going to learn from the teacher, the Black teacher who does it, and she's going to get her money that she deserves from it. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm going to do. The leader that you're saying you want, yeah, I think I was a pretty good school leader, but I know one right now who's doing the work. Annie, shout out to her, who's doing it. We're going to work together and they're going to get compensated for their work. So that's one of my dreams. Another one of my dreams is to create a space, a live space, where people who are interested in this idea can come and meet with a dream council, teachers, students, community members, and bring their pedagogical challenges. Like, I got a set of 8th grade students who I want to know how to write, but they are on 3rd grade level, that they could bring those, and through the dream council, right in that moment, they get bold ideas that are concrete that they can do tomorrow, so that they can see that dreaming is possible and can have a tangible impact.
So like a problem practice protocol sounds like?
You could, if we wanted to strip it down, I would say problem of practice protocol, but think of that through the lens of verve, liberation, style, innovation, ancestral, embodied knowledge that has some structure, but is really about like, give me more. How can we take it further? I already did it with my son, like where he was able to take it with that exact, like, that is my dream, to have spaces where we're actually doing that. Because when I did it with my son, his ideas were, I'm not going to curse, his ideas were extremely concrete and extremely dreamy. And if a teacher was doing the ideas that he said, it would be amazing. So I want to create those spaces. And then I mentioned, compensation and creating these learning spaces. All that stuff takes work to do. So I'm really invested in, really specifically on the continent of Africa, finding a space and a place where I can send teachers to go and rest. Many periods of time, like, a week, let's say, but ultimately it's going to take years to do it. But I want to send them on mini sabbaticals to rest on the continent, rejuvenate, and, do restoration and retreats, maybe something like that, but to really be able to rest without them having to think about the cost. That is like my big dream. And then the fourth one I'll just mention is that my daughter, this business idea that she has, that she's been working on, comes.
Wow, amazing. And you know what? Off air, I have a friend who's doing something similar in terms of finding a rest place. So I'm gonna make sure that y'all get connected somehow.
Yeah, please.
Just to have that synergy.
Yeah, please.
So you mentioned your daughter. You also mentioned your son earlier. So as we start to approach the hour, I want to give you a chance to just talk about life as a mother, because you're an educator, you're a liberator, you're a dreamer, but you're a mama.
Yeah.
And we need to acknowledge that it's an important and honorable role that we need to amplify. So thinking about what we've discussed over the past 48 minutes and thinking about how you grew up in East Oakland, challenges that you experience, and in some ways, you're seeing some parallels even with your son, who you told me off air, like, he ain't really feeling what's going on in school. Wow, that was me.
Yep.
Like, that was me at his age.
Yep.
So I got to know from you, how do you build self-efficacy in your children so that they not only take full ownership of themselves in this world, but also they're able to create their own pathways towards excellence and success, how they define it for themselves, of course.
Yep. Yeah. I love the addition of how they define it for themselves. So the first thing I'm going to say, I was thinking about this question. I speak to my kids in different registers. Okay. They're very different registers. So I will speak to them in the register that is pretty, let's just say, standards-based academic vocabulary, right? I will speak to them in that way. I also give them a lot of game. So like I explained to my kid, for example, this is like not the best maybe thing to be telling your kids, but my son was getting in trouble at school. And I was like, do you know what it means? Like when you're making the spot hot, like you're making it too hot over there. You can't do that. You know what I mean? Like do what you're doing, because they weren't doing anything bad, cracking jokes or all that, but don't make the jokes that you're cracking so loud to where you bring in attention to you know what I'm saying? So I talk to them in very different registers about different things, because let's just be honest, my kids don't know nothing about the hood. Like, they may listen to some stuff, but they don't know anything about. So, and I'm not necessarily trying to make them, but that's where I come from. And so I speak to them like through, I just feel like Oakland has so much gang in the way that we talk. There's just so much in there. So I speak to them in that way. I speak to them in other ways to try to help them see a well-rounded picture of what things are, who I am, what things can be. Because there's sometimes, I told you this earlier with how my son is feeling in school. I told the boy, you ain't got to go to school, Kingston, if that's not what you really want to do. But since you want to go, this is how that structure works. And because that structure is this way, this is the things that you're going to need to do if you want to be in that system. Now, if you want to do something else, then we can have that conversation, So I think it's different registers that I talk to them in, maybe like 5 or 6 different registers that I talk to them in. And I think that just gives them more. But the thing that I think is really important is I had this dream, many dreams ago, that my daughter and my son would be a part of my facilitation. If I'm saying that students matter and we want to center students, then bring my kids to center them in the workshops that I'm doing. And I did that. So Gia and Kingston talk about radical dreaming all the time. They know exactly what it is. They've been on stages. They know exactly, the spirit of that. Like, if I'm in this keynote, I'm going to talk about radical dreaming. I want to give an example. Gia, what's your radical dream? She, put hers together and shared it in front of, hundreds of people. So they know what that is. And I try to bring that to them. And then I took them to Africa with me, because I'm saying all this stuff, but it doesn't always land. They don't always understand why identity affirmation is super important. They're like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? So you know what? I took these jokers with me to Ghana a few weeks ago. And, they have been asking a lot of questions. Why do you care so much about doing this and that? Took them straight to Kokoko Village so they could sit with me and the elders and a whole bunch of students and see what I'm talking to you about, and took them to the door of no return so that they could understand. And through that, they starting to get it. So I heard my son go from saying, I want to be a business owner, to saying, I want to be a business owner that's community focused. I didn't tell him to say that, but I think trying to really say the words, the different registers, so they could see like that it's a big, broad, colorful world out there, but then really making sure, my dad forced me to go to ACAL. You know what I mean? So blessed that he did. You are going with me to Ghana. And it's not Ghana, because everybody can't go there. You're going with me to this museum. You know what I mean? You're going with me to this community meeting, or whatever the case is. So I try to do that. And then, like, I always tell them, if you have something you want to do, just tell me what it is. And either I'm going to be your number one investor, or we're going to find you some investors. And, they're kids. So we're talking about like $20, $20 here or there to try to make it happen. And my daughter truly has. She made $90 this week with her cookie business she's been building. So, I try to keep it that way. And then just the last thing I want to say about that is the family is super important. So we talk to my dad every day, got to talk to grandpa every day. We could keep them with my aunts, got to keep them with the family so that they understand kind of the legacy that they're a part of. But it's up and down, and it is not perfect. Let's just be very, very clear. Lots of wins and lots of like pulling my hair out.
Hey, and thank you for acknowledging that, because this is easier said than done.
For sure.
Parenting is easier said than done. Lots of trial and error. But to wrap things up, I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody on this podcast. And that is, how do you, Dr. Jamila Dugan, stay true to the teacher in you?
I love this question. You know why? Because I don't think of myself as anything but. Never forgot it. Never any experience that I'm going to develop, design, facilitate is going to be through the lens of the teacher, the relationship between the teacher and the learner, and how we together can make meaning and learning happen. That is the purpose, in my opinion, in the work at least that I do, is to help us get to a place of greater understanding, greater curiosity, greater inquiry, greater dreaming. And so you cannot do that if you do not see yourself as a teacher. If I see myself as the person who's just going to tell you this information, I mean, what good is that? I am a teacher today. right now. So that's how I stay true to the teacher in me, and I surround myself with teachers. There's not a week that I go by that I am not talking to a teacher about what is actually happening in the classroom. In fact, I owe a student, Hannah, I'm getting it together. I owe a student a letter right now to acknowledge some amazing things that they've done in the classroom. That's how I stay. And I'm a substitute teacher. I don't like just doing all the talking and not doing the thing at the same time. I'm not going to tell you about my expectations for academic rigor and how we treat students if I can't do that myself. So you can believe I am in a classroom in Tampa somewhere once a month teaching in a regular school, no private school, none of that, a regular school.
So you're a real one. You're a real one. You stay connected to your roots. I love it.
You have to.
I love it.
You have to.
Well, Jamila, thank you so much. This has been one of my favorite conversations. And I've done 200 episodes of this thing. And just when you think you're topping it, like you just come across another phenomenal person and you just raising the bar. But before I let you go, please let people know how they can connect with you. And feel free to talk a little bit about your services that you do provide, as far as consulting goes and any other projects that are on the horizon.
Yeah, so many projects, but there's one that I need to share the most. Let's just start with where to find me. Website, JamilaDugan.com, JamilaDugan.com. And then my baby, joysource.org, joy and source. .org, which is the manifestation of the dream I was talking about in terms of collaborating with educators who do the thing. But in a week or so, we're going to be announcing the Radical Dreaming Community of Practice. That's going to be open registration. I have been doing a Radical Dreaming Community of Practice for 2 years. Just got finished combing through all the data and feedback from actual teachers and leaders who went through it. And concretely, they have said the idea was lofty, sounded really good, but now it has transformed my practice and helped me meet the needs of my students in ways that I never thought was possible. So with that, having happened, we have decided that we're going to make it open registration for everyone. So one of my favorite teachers, Hannah, is going to be a part of it. Annie Fawn, who's a wonderful school leader, is going to be a part of it. And that registration is going to be opening really soon. And it'll be on the Joy Source website. And I wanted to tell you, Kwame, I'll get you the code, but anyone who watches this episode and is referred through you will get 10% off of that community of practice. So I'll make sure you have that information so that people have that code.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to put it in the episode notes so people can definitely register.
Yeah.
But Jamila, thank you again.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
We're going to have to do this again.
We're going to have to
do this again. This was amazing.
I know.
Yes. And for folks who are listening, thank you for coming back and listening to another episode of Identities of Educators Live. And as always, I wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time.
Bye,
Peace
everyone.
out, everybody.